I have never played this game, but I will still show you how to make money in RuneScape. As you might remember, I am now the proud owner of a massive gun. And while it definitely does help with my overcompensation issues, to obtain this marvelous piece of dwarven engineering, I had to liquidate all of my assets, and I essentially bankrupted myself. And as I still am 57 Batsibis, playing RuneScape for the first time, and blind for that matter, I will dedicate this episode to making money, and I'll create for you a noob money making guide in the process. And whether that turns out to be a guide for noobs to make money or a guide on how noobs make money and you should definitely avoid that remains to be seen. All I can tell you so far, I have a few ideas. And let's be honest guys, when in the past have my ideas made things worse? Let's just begin with money-making method number 1, the benchmark, which obviously isn't really an official money-making method, but rather me benchmarking how I made money so far, so that I can then compare it to all the nonsense that we are about to do, as this is a serious guide, a scientific one. But before we do that, I withdraw the last 100k available to buy 73 sharks and 178 swordfish. Don't worry, this is an integral part to this guide, and it might or might not make sense later. Until then, we get benchmarking, which means that I will do the very first thing I found out on how to make substantially more money than what the early game in RuneScape allows you to have, which is doing seasonal content and selling the rewards. And as it coincidentally tis the season, let's just do the Christmas event. So we get in line, completely ignoring that those are NPCs. This is a roleplay game after all. While the very next part, and you might not know that, but for me personally wasn't roleplay at all, as this year's Christmas event is essentially just a holiday rush shift at a restaurant. And as you know, out in the real world, I am a bartender. I essentially came home from work to do some more work. Marvelous. So yeah, you then continue to seat every single character from RuneScape's story so far, collect their drink and food orders, which also requires you to remember stuff. I somehow did it though. Good thing I warmed up IRL, I guess. But all of that, again, it doesn't really matter. I mean, we all know Christmas nowadays, it's so commercialized. All we care about are the gifts, such as a bunch of cosmetics that simply look however they look, but way more important than bringing us all the way back to money, I'm talking about all the noted items in my inventory, because those can actually be sold. And those really are the only gifts that I'm excited about. I feel like there's a lesson in there somewhere. Regardless of that, moment of truth, I instantly sell all the things that I've gotten, which, to be fair, for the sake of our little experiment, isn't the most optimal and cost-efficient approach. I'm well aware would probably get way more money if I sold those like a few weeks later, or maybe if I even just waited a little bit, but it matters not. After putting all of my unwanted gifts on the RuneScape eBay, I decided to actually wait and do the other benchmark first, which meant we got our strongest gear, including our biggest sword, as all of this really started with an overcompensation issue, right? They say money can't buy happiness, but it can buy massive guns and swords, so I don't really know. I do know the next step in my grand plan though. I will return to my cape business, as this was the other free-to-play moneymaker that I found, this time a more active one that I could revisit every time I did need money, even outside of the seasons. Also, I might probably be the only person in all of RuneScape grinding Highwayman at this particular intersection, so there's essentially no competition. There definitely is chance encounters though, such as this guy randomly trading me a lobster. Unsure why that was so important to him that he even thanked me for taking it. Because no, thank you. It's not that I needed healing necessarily, but it's Christmas, yeah? Followed just a few minutes later by this guy, who to be honest was mostly just interested in my big sword. I think there's infomercials about this type of situation, right? And as if that wasn't enough, literally the next guy coming past here, once again complimenting the size of my equipment, and this is really what makes this moneymaker so rich in not just monetary gains, but also social ones. And for full disclosure, I want to say that this is unironically the very first time something like this happened here. Exactly the one time I'm recording it. Unsure what to think of that. Nonetheless, some uninterrupted moments later, I kill my last guy, obtain the last cape, and we return to Varrock with a full inventory. Finally, bringing us to the moment of truth. And as they say, time is money, I will now also give you an estimate on how much gold per minute each activity was worth it. So from leaving the bank, serving all the people, and returning all of the crowns and Christmas gifts back to the Grand Exchange, it took us, as a rough estimate, 14 minutes. And once I now also tell you that after selling all the goods, I made 301,000 gold, this leaves us at a respectable 21,500 gold per minute. To be honest, once per event, but that's still not bad. If we are now comparing that to 28 capes obtained with, the truth be told, minor social interruptions over the duration of 40 minutes, then the end result of, well, 5,500 gold, or 137.5 gold per minute, doesn't really compare, does it? Then I say it again, none of it was done with efficiency in mind, and I just wanted to sell the stuff as fast as possible to have some numbers to work with. Obviously, you could let auctions run overnight at higher price, or hold Christmas items and sell them in summer, but after all we did for now was merely a benchmark. Because as I told you guys, I have some ideas. And this was really just my free-to-play alter ego that I left in the past, and we now have some goals to beat. So I spent some time on a brainstorming session, ultimately bringing us to moneymaker number 2, professions. I know, creative as fuck, but the thing is I've actually never done those with the intent of making money. And also I was told money doesn't grow on trees, but I think in this case it's merely just because my woodcutting skill is too low. Which brings me exactly to my strategy. I simply took the 2 highest skills I had and tested those. But before we do that, we take 73 sharks and 178 swordfish and put them back on the Grand Exchange. Don't worry, this is an integral part to this guide and it will definitely make sense later. Remember, I have a plan. But first, I gather my finest mining outfit and let's get going. As all of my efforts so far, they are more reminiscent of a non-profit organization really, and we gotta change that. On top of that, I have never seen sandstone in the game, so I will not be going for the highest material possible through mining, but I'll take a little bit of a different route. But one thing became obvious relatively quickly, just because those are the nearest to the Grand Exchange doesn't necessarily make those the most effective ones. Because I definitely didn't expect that I would have to fight off hordes of skeletons to be able to mine my own business. And after figuring out that further to the north, it is the same ordeal, just a different type of opponent, and they all really just want to kick me out of this place, I finally gave in to their request, which then brings me all the way to the barbarians, and we can finally truly begin. My first attempt is simply the second highest material I can mine, which is coal, filling the entire inventory, and essentially selling it to you guys. All of that effort bringing me 6,400 gold, and if we factor out the little detour, then it took me 11 minutes to get there, which brings us to 582 gold per minute, which is almost 5 times as effective as my cape grind was, so we're definitely moving up in the world, but I feel like we could do better, so I simply did it again. Barbarians, swinging at coal rocks, but this time, once your inventory has this particular pattern, we return to outside Varrock to now swing at some iron rocks. All of that we then obviously turn into steel bars, and then hammer it into a bunch of scimitars and 15 nails. A choice I purely made out of my experience, and given that this isn't my highest stat, those might not be the most optimal choices here, but be that as it may, if we this time sell all of our efforts, we end up with a whooping 720 gold. And given that on top of it, this even took me 13 minutes to achieve, 55 gold per minute definitely is a new low. So what if we did the exact same thing, but this time simply just sold the steel bars instead? Not only would that reward us with 4,700 gold, but also given that this again took me 11 minutes, means 427 gold per minute. A slight difference, I would argue. And one trend is fundamentally obvious: the more XP you generate for yourself throughout the process, the less the end result is worth, which, to be honest, it kinda makes a lot of sense. But we're not even quite done yet, as there's one other complementary set of skills that are actually higher than mining and smithing, so let's attempt the same thing with fishing and cooking. In this case, we technically have upfront costs, but given that I for some reason have 1,500 feathers in my inventory, and I mean a fishing rod, you kinda buy that anyways, I think for now we can let those slide. Remember that though, as the sentiment might change later. Until then, I get to my most favorite fishing spot and I left click. Until 4 minutes later, I have all the trouts and salmon I could ask for. And after, selling them without XP generation, 1,680 gold, or 419 gold per minute. But all the while waiting for my fish, I realized that I can do rainbow fish already, something I've never done before, I might note, which is also fly fishing, but with different kinds of feathers. So this time around I do invest 234 gold to acquire 26 feathers. I then transform 26 stripy feathers into 26 rainbow fish, only here realizing that, yeah, I could have done 27, but be that as it may, it does turn out even selling only 26 rainbow fish is still worth 10k plus minus, keeping in mind the initial upfront costs, of course, because this is a serious guide, a scientific one, where it also turns out that all of this took me 9 minutes, bringing us to the current record holder of 1,111 gold per minute. So far, beating pretty much absolutely everything we tried by quite a bit. And before you ask, yes, I did cross-check the selling cooked fish option as well, which once again, 182 gold per minute for salmon and trout, and 242 for rainbow fish in the cooked variant, which once again is in no comparison to the raw version. And in theory I was done here, but all of that fishing got me another idea. What if we do a different type of gathering fish? So what if we simply just walk up to the fishing spot and pick up all the dropped fish that the people don't need because they're just here for the XP, and merely 1.5 minutes later we sell all of that for 1,800 gold, which would actually bring us to 1,200 gold per minute. The only question would be the reliability of this method, as I think I got incredibly lucky walking up and finding an entire inventory of almost salmon out there, so this would definitely require some further testing, but it's definitely a strong contender if it just happens to happen. Until then, there's only one thing to do, which is money-making method number 3, trading. Or in other words, it's finally time to tell you what one would do with 73 sharks and 178 swordfish. Because, as you know, I had a plan. And the plan is rather simple, and even in hindsight, actually made a lot of sense, as the moment I withdrew the 100k was Friday 1 PM. Given that I'm from Europe, in my mind, most people would just start playing the game throughout the weekend from this point forward. So supply should be at an all-time high, but the demand was yet to rise. So much for the theory. Let's find out if the assessment was correct. As we now fast forward to Saturday 5 PM. I list both kinds of fish. They both sell instantly, which that's a good thing, right? And one collection moment of truth later revealing 91,000 gold, which, given that it cost me around 99,000 to buy these, puts me at a minus 8,000. Or, well, as this is a serious guide, a scientific one, minus 4.7 gold per minute, which is also some sort of a record. And if you would now think, okay, funny little guy, he tried his thing and learned a lesson, let me tell you, I do have a plan. As it is currently Sunday 3 PM, and I somehow have 100,000 gold in my inventory again. And oh no, he's heading straight for the Grand Exchange again. And I am unsure if it's simply the failure to accept defeat, being unable to see the truth, as my plans usually might not be the best. Probably the worst part was becoming a living meme of buying high and selling low. So I wanted to give it another shot and rectify all of this. So what else did I blame for my failures? Market orders. And to see if I was correct with that assessment, this time I wasn't just buying the sharks, I pressed the minus 5% button. Does that do something? I wouldn't even know. But I definitely wasn't instantly buying, so that's good news for my plan, right? And once my buy orders did go through, once we offered them back up for sale, we this time simply pressed the plus 5% button. Right? Because if any of the finance gurus and YouTube videos have taught me anything, money-making is that simple, as long as you don't question it or try it out yourself. And I could stay chronological as I was doing some other things in the meantime, but let's get this trading chapter done by moving to Tuesday 4 PM. 2 days later, the sharks still didn't sell, which made me alter my offer until they sold, while I got rid of the swordfish at the higher price. So all of these eventualities bring us to 99,500 gold, which given the 2% fee you have to pay on every sale, and the fact that I probably sold the shark for less than I bought them, once again, this isn't too bad actually. Would definitely require some more playing around with what to buy and how to sell it properly, but given that you technically don't have to do anything other than have a bunch of money, maybe this wasn't that bad of an idea to begin with. As per usual, it might merely just be a lack of proper execution. So let's rather quickly move on to moneymaker number 4, beating things up, which really just is a video game tale as old as time. You hit a guy until they involuntarily hand stuff over. Said stuff is them being sold, of course. And as my attempts of becoming RuneScape's Warren Buffett, and probably the intellectual approach connected to it, doesn't seem to be quite my cup of tea, maybe I just gotta resort to blunt brute force. And what better place than down here in the sewers? Money talks, they say, but down here it's just so beautifully quiet, almost poetic. Which is clearly the reason, and not that I haven't really found any better place just yet, and also given that we can simply just grind out the key drop for the boss fight in the end, gives me a clear goal. I then quickly realize that I've reached a point where inventory management is actually the bigger difficulty, and it isn't survival anymore, which I think is a good thing, as my inventory filling up, meanwhile is outpacing me eating fish, which technically lowers the upfront investment, but given the time frame and also the money made in this ordeal, I think we can ignore that part this time around, as there is the potential for a particular seed to drop that in itself was already worth 17,000, so spending a few on fish doesn't really matter that much anymore. So yeah, the process in itself rather simple, and all of it really just continues until the key drops, which is instantly prompted by a reset, reinvesting in some fish of course, and so the only thing left to do, beating up Briofita, which is something that even I have done often enough by now that this usually shouldn't really end in a disaster, bringing us to the moment of truth, the final drop after we kill the boss. 2 rune swords with an estimated value of 23,000. 1 merchandise session later, selling absolutely everything we've gotten in the process, including the axe, leaving us with roughly 70,000 gold factoring out the fish. This entire ordeal took me around 66 minutes, leaving us at 1,060 gold per minute, a number that might potentially vary heavily depending on which items drop during the grind and how long it takes for you to actually get the key. But it regardless of that, probably being a reasonable thing to do, which is entirely opposed by my final money-making method, a little bit of a wild card probably. Money-making method number 5, the reseller. So what the hell is that supposed to be? And it's actually one of these things that, once again in theory, it's rather simple. I don't really know how and why it actually works, but I want to give it a try regardless. And all I really need is a bunch of runes, essentially all the money I have, and an empty inventory. And a hat apparently. As the base for this idea essentially started all the way when I did my first little journey through Gillinor once I entered the members world. As there I came across a certain concept that in hindsight actually kinda makes sense, could potentially be used to make money, but well, we gotta try it out. And I will do it exactly at the place where I first came in contact with this concept. You see, on my first day I tried to figure out how every single new skill works, and while I was trying to figure out the hunter skill, I had to buy supplies, and it does turn out in all of the world, there is only this particular shop out here. And while making sense of all the things in the inventory, if you do examine some of them, you realize that they do sell for more on the Grand Exchange than you would buy them at this shop, which is literally the plan. I just buy as many of the stuff as I can and resell it to the lazy people that don't want to go here. And I say it again, in theory this does make a lot of sense, doesn't it? But is that in a reasonable way profitable? Definitely not if these jars don't stack, which would explain why they sell for 27 times as much as I would buy them here, but multiplying 1 gold, yeah, that's not gonna cut it. But through trial and error, I eventually figured out that bird snares are the play, as not only do they stack, but on average are doubling your money, even when buying all 50 at a bulk, which brings us to one final problem, an effective way of acquiring these at a massive scale, which leaves me no other option than doing something which I am usually rather opposed to in MMOs, hopping worlds. We are simply swapping to a new server, instantly restocking the shelves of this guy's store. There we simply buy the entire stock and repeat, which then got me stuck in an incredible gameplay loop of clicking a server, buying some things, to click another server. So it's definitely safe to say from all the things that I've tried, this is clearly the most exhilarating one. And given that I didn't really have a particular goal in mind, I pretty much just kept going until I really couldn't no more. Which was exactly the point of return to Varrock. My inventory offering over 2,000 bird snares, and a handful of jars of course. Which led to an investment of 16,500 gold. And also technically an additional investment of 19 minutes. Which brings us to the final moment of truth. We put up all the bird snares for sale, and given that these are definitely a lot, I didn't expect them to sell instantly anyways. So now we wait until our next gaming session. All the snares have been sold, which ultimately leads to 31,000 gold, more or less actually doubling my money. But more importantly, 763 gold per minute, ignoring the wait until everything's sold of course. Which once again reinforces the idea that my plans aren't all too bad, but I am yet again simply lacking proper execution. But all that I really learned out of this entire project, the rich are getting richer, and I merely got better at some profession and combat skills, but that's something as well. Until then, it really was fun to have a little bit more of a structured approach for once. But I think it is definitely time to return to chaos. Because let's be honest, metagaming really isn't my type of gameplay. And on top of that, I'm sure that this will happen sooner or later all by itself.